Okay, I think we've got quite a few people on the call now, so I will kick us off. So I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar from Market-Wide Half-Hourly Settlement and the Way Forward. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Welby. I'm the Senior Responsible Owner for the MHHS project, and I'll be taking you through today. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So what we'll do today, I will give you a brief summary of what happened at yesterday's Open Day, and then I will talk to you about what MHHS delivers, and how it facilitates new opportunities. I'll then hand over to my colleagues, Chris Harden and Jason Brogdon, to talk about the program delivery and the way forward. And then we will have a short Q&A session at the end, which we will do by using Slido, which if we could have the next slide, please. So if you'd like to log into Slido at slido.com, and our number is 277383, which we have put at the bottom of all the slides. So if you don't capture that number now and realize you want to put a question forward, then you can look at the bottom of the slide that's been presented at the time and the number will be there. So hopefully that can. So next slide, please. So to give you a brief summary of the Open Day, so it was a well-attended event. There's over nearly 100 people there in the room, and it's great to see a lot of people coming out from lockdown. And one of the key comments during the breakout session was how nice it was to meet colleagues that they haven't seen for ages in person. But one of the key messages today is that we're moving forward, and this is the key message of this webinar and of the Open Day, is that we're no longer really talking about why we're doing this. What we're talking about now is what we're doing, how we're going to approach it, and when we're going to be doing stuff. So that's an important thing. The other thing that came across is obviously that I've got to the point we will be finishing the design in July, because Ofgem have now decided on change request 1 and said that they favour the delay of the design phase reaching of M5 to July. And at that point we'll be doing a replan. But one of the key things that did come across is that many parties are in different stages of mobilisation. This runs from people who are already have done their impact assessment using the TOM, so they haven't waited for the design, and aware of what the impact of this program is going to have on their systems and their processes, right through to people who are aware of the program but have not actually taken any positive steps to do any analysis or to stand up program teams. So that is one of the key messages that came across to us. Obviously, there's a couple of speakers there which were not available today. So Rachel Clark from Ofgem presented on her view, and she was there, as I mentioned before, to mention that the Ofgem has decided to approve CR01 to delay M5 to July. But it comes with caveats that she also wants the IPA's recommendations to be taken into account, which is having a playback period to help everybody consume and understand the design, recognizing that not everybody has complete resources in place, so we need to help, and that's something that the program will take on to help people understand the design and what it means for them. She also made the point that, given recent energy price increases, she believes that customers are looking for other ways to save money, and smart meters they hope would help them, because they could shuffle load around. So this is all the more imperative that we get on with this program. She also announced that the BSC Co Elexon would be given the enduring governance of the EDA, the DIP as we call it, which was an announcement we were expecting. The other speaker was Andy Manning from Citizen Advice, and he was very clear that he wanted this delivered as soon as practically possible. He wanted customers to get access to price signals which would allow them to make behavioural changes to try and reduce their bills. And And it also made the point that Citizen Advice is fully engaged with this programme, and they are part of the governance of this programme. They sit on PSG, or on the Design Advisory Group, and other groups, and they're certainly looking now to build positive comms around MHHS in the public domain. So also a lot of interest in the stalls we had set up on the day. So we had stalls on things like the design, the testing element, how the program management office works. The IPA also had a stand explaining their role within the program, and these were very well attended, and a lot of debate and a lot of discussion. From the feedback we've got, a lot of people really appreciated the opportunity to have that discussion with the subject matter experts in those areas to get a better understanding of those aspects of the programme. So moving on now, so that was a summary of the open day, and I'm sorry those of you who were unable to attend, that you missed it. So what I'm going to do now is talk to you about what MHS delivers and how it facilitates new opportunities. So next slide, please. I think it's no surprise to anybody on this call that the electricity market is changing. We all know there's a climate emergency, and we all know that we need to get to zero carbon. And for electricity, well, zero carbon by 2050 as an economy, but in order to do that, the electricity market, I think common consensus is that we need to be zero carbon by 2035. That means we need to get more intermittent generation on the system, more wind, more solar, more battery. And to complement that, we need to increase demand side flexibility. And that allows customers to engage and move their demand to match the generation that's available. Customers are also changing. So, customers are going to be moving to electrify their transport, their cars, and more customers will be heating their home through electric forms of heating. So, as we know, electric transport, the internal combustion engine, there'll be no new sales of internal combustion engine by 2030, and there will be no installations of gas boilers in homes for new homes from 2025. So there are other levers that are pushing customers into electrification. It's also worth saying that, in the current energy crisis, that customers at the moment have no choice to either use less or spend more. If we'd had market-wide half-hourly settlement in place, then we could have provided them with a third option, which is to move the times that they use electricity to cheaper times of day. Unfortunately, at this moment in time, apart from the basic Economy 7, there's very little we can do in that situation. And it's important to point out that MHHS is an essential component to engaging customers with the use of electricity, but it is a fundamental building block to others to do things. So as part of the final business case, it was recognised that this is an essential stepping stone in that direction, and we need to deliver it. But obviously, there's stuff to be done beyond that in order to engage customers. Next slide, please. So at the basic level, what are we actually changing? At the basic level, where market-wide half-hourly settlement will allow the industry to collect on a daily basis the half-hourly data of most consumers. And to kill a couple of myths, then, it is on a daily basis. We're not going to be collecting on a half-hour by half-hour basis. And customers do have the right to opt out to sharing their settlement data, their half-hourly data for settlement purposes if they choose to do so. There is also a separate consent mechanism, which is opt-in, if they wish to share their half-hourly data for billing or for marketing purposes or other purposes. So just because a customer doesn't opt out to sharing their half-hourly data for settlement data, does not mean that their half-hourly data is a free-for-all by the industry. What it does mean is, because its suppliers network operators will see the actual usage of customers each half hour instead of using the profiling system that is currently used to profile customers' usage between their meter readings. But it is worth mentioning here that suppliers and network operators are not particularly interested in seeing individual data from individual customers. It's about aggregating it and seeing the actual demand of their portfolio, or in the network operator's case, the actual demand as it appears on their network. So just to make the point, there's nobody going to be sitting there going, oh, Mrs. Jones has put a kettle on at 11 o'clock again. It's not going to happen. Suppliers will need to buy power in anticipation of what their customers will use and no longer have avenues. Industry speak, at the moment they're exposed to volume, but they're not exposed to shape. Once they get market-wide in place, then obviously they'll be exposed to both shape and volume, and will have to do much as ESO already has to do, which is to anticipate potential mass changes in consumption or demand because of particular events, football matches, coronations, and all those sorts of things which will change customers' demand. Network companies will also be able to see the half-hourly data, as I mentioned, and this is useful for them as they will be able to get a better understanding of how customers are utilising their network. Next slide, please. So what opportunities does this create for suppliers? Well, at a very basic level, better understanding their customer usage, and it will allow them to develop a different suite of tariff for different customers. But not suggesting that every customer will have their own bespoke tariff, but it's certainly a situation so we could see, and part of this will be trial and error. We have to look at the customer's appetite for complexity. So simple things like perhaps offering customers a cheaper rate at weekends will obviously be of interest to some, but some customers may be willing to go dynamic and actually reflect real-time forecasting of what prices will be based on issues such as availability of generation and things. Also need to look at, suppliers will have to categorize their customers and recognize that they can do certain things for fuel poor, for EV drivers, for customers with electric heating, and all those sorts of things. It also creates an opportunity to encourage dynamic load shifting, but obviously we don't want customers sitting there on a half-hour by half-hour basis making decisions based on signals that we send them. So there has to be some sort of artificial intelligence in there, and it certainly creates an opportunity for suppliers to offer a way to move demand which is not time sensitive, so that customers don't have to physically interact. It also creates an opportunity if you're going to have a wider suite of tariffs, then customers will be picking tariffs based on what suits their lifestyles, and that potentially creates for suppliers a better retention, or possibly a way to get customers away and encourage customers to join them if they offer a set of tariffs which suits that particular customer. It certainly moved the market away, we hope, from its all about price mentality that currently exists. Also believe it offers, as I mentioned before, it offers a way for those in fuel poverty to reduce their bills by their behavioural change. And I think it's something that suppliers could really engage with and providing tariffs that would suit people who are struggling with their bills and to support them in a way that obviously we all want to do as an industry. Next slide. Thank you. So what does this mean for networks? Well, understanding their network usage at the metering point level is also going to be useful. It means they can get below the substation and understand what's happening. It will allow them to understand and see potentially when there's a significant change in demand, such as when somebody takes on an EV vehicle or switches to a heat pump for heating. They will allow them to identify properties with not just with changing usage, but also identify properties with export, and when that export is coming onto the network. All of this will allow, this data will allow network companies to make better investment decisions and give early warnings of network stress, so they can anticipate when the build-up is coming on. So if I can give an example, if one person gets an electric vehicle in a street, then that's not a problem. But when the second and third and fourth comes, then rather than wait until the substation starts to creak, they, network company will be able to identify that and make an investment decision based on knowledge rather than guesswork. It also creates the option to, rather than invest in wires and such thing, to look at localized network tariffs to encourage behavioral changes. There's a lot of work that has to be done to how that interacts with the supply relationship with their customers, but certainly the opportunity would be there, and it would allow potentially, you know, solutions that are not just adding thicker wires into digging up streets and adding thicker wires into the network. Next slide, please. Most importantly, what does this mean for customers? Will allow customers to get better value on their electricity spend by choosing when they use their electricity. So it does mean that, customers need to look at that. But I believe customers already, as sophisticated customers, we already do this sort of thing when looking at things like off-peak travel, when you can get cheaper seats at the cinema, all those sorts of things that customers are used to, and I think they would react with this and help do it. I also think there's potential, to use AI, as I mentioned before, to optimize customers' use for non-sensitive, time-sensitive demand. So you want your electric vehicle, you want it fully charged by a certain time, but you don't necessarily care when it actually gets charged. The same with hot water. You want to make sure that you've got hot water at a certain point, but actually when the hot water is heated is less of an issue for you. All of that can be brought in and use AI to do that. I also think there's a potential perhaps to move, particularly in heating, to move to a situation where we could offer as an industry fixed price in return, so a fixed price to keep your house warm. And then the suppliers or intermediaries working on behalf of the customer to allow them to offer a fixed price at X pounds per month to keep your house at a certain temperature, and then using the ability to switch on and off as they can, but using dynamics of the system, which were really interesting research has been done, and I expect that more research will be done on that. It's also worth pointing out that this is a win-win situation for customers. It does not require every customer to engage in the time of use tariff. So many customers won't, but the fact that some do will reduce the cost of meeting both peak demand and in terms of generation and on terms of network. So hopefully it should lead to lower bills for everybody, although recognizing that those that do engage and who are active engaging will probably get better benefit than those that don't. It's also worth pointing out that for many customers, at the moment they get a guaranteed export on for anything that they export, or potentially they don't even get anything because it's not metered. But it does create the ability for people to offer more dynamic export tariffs, and recognizing that export onto the system is better value at certain times of day than others. And that then brings the whole situation of batteries into play, and using AI where customers may be importing, using their export, or putting their export into battery with a view of putting it out onto the network at a later time for better value. Next slide, please. Finally, what opportunities does this create for the environment? Obviously, greater level of weather-dependent generation on the system. We do need to decarbonise. We're going to have to do that. So we can do that because we can use demand-side flexibility to support that sort of generation and start matching it on a more granular level. That makes it easier to decarbonise the electricity system. In turn, if we can decarbonise the electricity system, then we can decarbonise heat and transport using that electricity, and therefore moving us at a fastest pace to meet our net zero obligations as a country and as a planet. One final point I want to say is a lot of people come to me and say, I agree with all of this, it's very important that we do this, but is now the actual time to do this? And my answer to that is quite honestly no. I actually believe that we should be done this 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, because as an industry, I think we've let people down by not moving faster on this. the energy crisis at the moment, customers have not really got the option to save money by switching the times that they use their electricity. And I think that's a big failing. I also think we could be further down the line with the decarbonisation of the system if we'd have already implemented market-wide hard settlement. So on that basis, I think it's really important that we get on with this job and get it delivered. In my view, my personal view, this is the most important program that the industry is carrying out at the moment. And a lot of people I understand sort of say, well, there's a lot going on, and I don't disagree with that. But I think in terms of priority, this is the one that has to move. And I strongly encourage everybody in the industry to get behind it and move with it, and let's deliver this. Thank you. I'd like now to hand over to my colleague, Chris Harden, who's going to talk about the actual programme itself. Chris.
Thanks, Chris. And good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Harden. I'm the half-hourly settlement programme director. And the purpose of this session is to talk about the plan. And what we're going to do is going to try and break it into two parts. So I'm going to talk briefly about the current baseline plan. And then I'm going to hand over to Jason, who's standing in for Keith, who can't be with us today. So thank you, Jason, just to talk about where we go post M5 and what we're going to do with the replan. So if I can have the first slide, please. So the current plan, and apologies to those of you who understand this already, but as someone recently said to me, and I know it was tongue in cheek, but they did say to me, living in the Southwest, M5 is a motorway. So it dawned on us in the programme that we talk about M5 and M9 and M15, but it's not common parlance across participants yet. And given that it will become, I suspect, going forward in this programme, I think it's quite important that we all understand what those milestones are and what they actually mean. Because the other thing we've picked up is that people interpret these milestones in slightly different ways. So I'm going to give you the program's view of this. And if you have different views or think that it's slightly more nuanced, then please, get in contact with us and let us know if you have a different view. So we're going to start with M5. And hopefully everyone knows what M5 is because it's been front and center recently. But it's an absolutely key milestone, and a lot hangs off the back of M5, as you're going to see as we just talk through this in a minute. And following yesterday's announcement from Ofgem, M5 has moved from the end of April this year to the end of July. So just a bit about M5 and what's being delivered. So there's going to be 80 plus artifacts that will be delivered out of M5, out of the detailed design. And they are documents that comprise, the business processes, the interface specs, logical data definitions, and all those sorts of things. And it also contains what people call the operational choreography, which is essentially timings of messages that get sent between people. So if I send you this message, I expect a response within, I don't know, X hours, days, or whatever. So all this is built into the output of M5. And the purpose of this is essentially it has enough detail so that you can hand these design documents to your IT departments or to your suppliers, so they can start the detailed design and actually the build, or they can provide you with costs and timescales as to how long they think it's going to take to be able to do this going forward. And just to be clear, that's not the endpoint for the design team who are working on M5. And I know a couple of people have asked what happens there. The design team will continue post M5 to help participants understand the design, to consume the design, and to resolve queries and clarify understanding. And we will soon publish a series of a sort of roadmap as to what it is that we're doing post M5, where we'll have road shows and clinics and things like that for people. So it's not a case of just finishing the design and then walking off the park and leaving you to it. The design team will be there to answer all those queries going forward. And just as I said right at the beginning, it's a key milestone with lots of dependencies off the back of it. So it's key that we complete this as soon as possible. So thank you to those of you who are actually taking part in this, in the design sessions at the moment. We really appreciate it. We're getting lots of comments, which is really good. Design's looking okay, still lots to do, but please keep taking part because we really do appreciate it. Okay, I'm sort of going to go backwards a bit now, and I'm going to talk about M3, which is titled Design Build Start. And this has sort of caused a lot of confusion in the program. So I thought I'd just give you the program's view, and I think it again comprises two parts. There's post M3, which I want to talk about, and then there's pre M3. So I'm going to do post M3 first. And design and build phase will commence, and Elexon of central systems have started and the DCC started, which is great. And other parties were are due to start in May 2022, which will now obviously move back to August 2022. But what does design build actually mean, and how do we interpret it? Because we've heard a number of different interpretations of this. Some people have taken it literally, which I actually really like, but I don't think it's what's intended, which is that as soon as the design's out, you go off and you start your own design and build of your own systems. Now, I know that some participants will be able to do that, and in fact, I know that some participants have already started, which is really good. But we also know that a number of participants are going to have to go to their IT suppliers to get quotes to be able to work out how long it's going to take, and they're going to have to negotiate with them and so on. That's part of what we consider to be the DB start thing as well. So it's not literally you are starting your design and build. If you're starting to engage with your suppliers, that's part of this phase as well. And we're also aware of a number of people who are looking at essentially re-evaluating their entire IT landscape off the back of this change as well. So might we be outsourcing certain components of it? Might we be bringing some other stuff back in-house? Might we be changing suppliers because we can get better products from elsewhere and those sorts of things? Again, that's part of this DB start. So please don't think that, don't take this literally. So just to be clear, all those different ways of looking at it are encompassed in what happens post M3. Now, pre M3, whilst it's not explicitly stated, it's sort of synonymous with people having mobilized their programs. And why do we in the program think this? Well, in order to take part in the design, we sort of assume that your programs were mobilized and you had resources available to be able to do that. In order to start what happens post M3 around the design and build, we would have assumed you'd have mobilization, that your teams were ready and up and running, that you've got your business cases in place, you'd sort of got some money set aside, that the boards were aware of it, that you've got a sponsor. And then some participants have actually said that they're not going to mobilize until post M5. And that's fine. But we sort of assume that therefore you're not taking part in the design. And that's not to say you can't, but these are the sort of assumptions that we're making. Now, if that's not right, do let us know. But one of the key themes that came out yesterday, and one of the key risks from the open day that we picked up yesterday, was not enough people are mobilized yet. So I think we just need to know when people are going to mobilize going forward. Okay. And then I just want to come on to M9. So M9 is part of system integration testing, and it's currently being worked on by TMAG. So they're talking about entry criteria, exit criteria of PIT, and all those sorts of things. So please engage with TMAG going forward. It is on the critical path as to when we go into when we go into industry testing. So one of the big questions here for me is when do we start doing that? What's a good timescale between M5 and M9? And again with M10, there's whilst M10 specifically talks around central systems being ready, there's a cluster of milestones around this point where there's the start of migration of various different types of meters and MPANs and so on. So, but essentially M10 is the start of go live. So between M9 and M10, how long is it that we need to prove? How long is it that we need to do system integration testing to prove that this system works such that we can get ready to go live, and we can go live at M10? And then finally M15, and to Chris's point earlier and to Rachel's point yesterday, we don't want to move this end date. So we've got to look at ways of getting this program done by sort of October 2025. So how do we do that, and what opportunities do we have? And I think, and this is a big message, and we really need your help in this as part of the replan going forward, is we have an opportunity here, because this isn't a big bang approach. We have the opportunity to phase our go live here. So at M10, can we bring M10 to the left? Because if we've got core components that we need, like Helix and the DCC and the DNOs, for the registration systems, what's the core component that we need, the minimum viable go live set? And then how can we bring people on? So people who can go live early, why wouldn't we let them do that? It benefits customers. If we can get these tariffs out earlier, it benefits customers going forward. So you'll hear that phrase, and you'll be aware of that phrase from faster switching, which is let's not move at the pace of the slowest. But I do actually think that we also have an opportunity in this program here to move at the pace of the fastest. And so if people are ready to go live, let's explore ways in which we can let them do that. So the reason I'm talking about this is because it all comes back to the final thing, which is actually not a milestone, it's an activity, which is PM2, which is the rebaselining of the plan. So we were originally going to do that at the end of 2021, but we've had conversations with Ofgem and participants, and we feel that it's best to start that exercise post the design. Typically, the accuracy of a replan post an understanding of a design it's far greater. It's 80% plus typically. So let's move. So it's really good news that we can move it from prior to the design completing to post the design completing. And Jason's just going to talk about the process in a minute that we're going to go through for the rebaseline of that plan. It is a key activity, and we really need your involvement in this, and we really want your involvement in this, because history tells us from Nexus and from faster switching that it's only when the industry has bought into the plan and that they believe in the plan and they've had a say in it that the plan really becomes viable and everyone gets behind it. And we've got an opportunity here post M5 to be able to do this, to make this our plan, all of ours, something that we all believe in, that we know that we can deliver, that we agree with the approach, and that we know where we fit in with it. So I would ask you all to start thinking about these different approaches, and also to get involved in the replan. So thank you. I shall now hand over to Jason. Sorry, Jason, you're on mute, I think.
Schoolboy error. Yes, thank you, Chris. And as Chris W said at the beginning, I've had a quick scan through the participants on the call. It's good to see some familiar faces and good to see some new faces. So hopefully we'll be running through our approach to planning. I'll reinforce some of the messages that Chris has already given, but run through what we propose to do for the design baseline, so the activity that's currently underway, then look at the program replan approach, and then run through some of our delivery approach and principles. And what I would say is, this is an illustration of our approach to planning going forwards. This hasn't actually been through our program steering group yet, so we're giving you an early insight into this, and we'd really appreciate any questions through Slido, and any feedback that you have would be gratefully received after. I see in Slido that there's a question around lessons learned from faster switching, and both of the Chris's have mentioned that. We have tried to apply the lessons learned from switching in the approach we're looking at in planning, design, and also in the governance. So I think it's difficult to pick out individual items for the lessons learned from switching, but the confidence in the plan and the inclusion of industry and replanning is one of the key lessons that's learned. One of the things that was reinforced by Rachel Clark at the Open Day yesterday, and hopefully by running through this, you'll see that level of inclusivity. So if I start here on the bottom left-hand corner with the approach that we're taking to design, and I hope those of you who've been engaged in the design process are familiar with the way that we've tranched the 80+ design artifacts that Chris talked about earlier. We are in the process of running through the first tranche and the second tranche of those design artifacts. And again, we've had some great engagement. We've had a lot of feedback, which is what we wanted. We're encouraging that feedback, and we're incorporating that feedback into iterations of the design. And there's plenty of opportunity for people to participate in that design, both through the level 4 working groups, through the consultations that are being issued, and the opportunities to review back against those design artifacts. And that plan is going to take us to a baseline design at the end of July. That's consistent with the change request 1 that Chris referred to earlier, that Ofgem have made their determination on. So we are all guns blazing towards that design baseline and the M5, the magical M5 physical design baseline, for the end of July. So this plan, we have obviously another level of detail below this plan that's been publicised as well for the different tranches, what's coming where. That's being tracked and reported at the design advisory group and at the programme steering group, as you'd expect. The design is also subject to independent assurance, both from the LDPSI team within the programme, and also from the IPA. PwC is the independent programme assurer, looking at the design from an external perspective. So there's a lot of opportunity for industry input. We have our own assurance activities, so that gives us confidence in the quality of the design that's going to be published in July. Recognising that there's a lot to get through, and we're continually looking at the ways in which we can best approach the plan to delivering the design with the appropriate input at the end of M5. So I hope that a lot of you are familiar with this, and please do contact us if you're not familiar but you want to make the most of your opportunity to input into that design for the end of July, because it is a key activity. And it's in the delivery principles. It was raised by the IPA, but we are intending to run through walkthroughs of the design in parallel with running through walkthroughs of the programme plan, which I'm going to talk through in a moment, from August onwards. So it's not a here's a drop of the design, away you go and digest it at your leisure. We are going to be more proactive. We're going to provide the opportunity for us to give you more insight into the design through walkthroughs, and that it's a key finding of the IPA, but it was something that we were planning to do anyway to make sure that that you're in the best position to kick off those DB activities that Chris talked about earlier. So if I move from the design plan into the program planning activities along the top here, and this is that that PM2 activity that Chris referred to earlier, that has been moved into this year. And the first thing I'm going to say is, on the far left-hand side of this, in the little white box at the bottom, we are already undertaking a more detailed planning activity within the programme, because we need a much more granular programme plan to validate the dates that were in that transition plan that Chris talked through, to challenge some of the old assumptions within there, and to reflect your input and the time and scale of the activities that you have to do in order to meet those milestones that are set out in the previous slide, particularly around M9 and M10, are those key sort of ready for sit and go live milestones. And we've got a priority to get that level of detail, because that reduces uncertainty and increases the amount of information available to you all as programme parties on what you need to do and when. And again, to keep reiterating the lessons learned and the approach that we're taking, we need this to be inclusive. There's absolutely no point in going through a replanning exercise, deliver a plan at the end of it, that people aren't bought into, because then we'll just have to do it again, or people will look to undermine what we've done to date. So it's really important for us to be inclusive right from the start. So what we're looking for are volunteers from industry parties to participate in early planning activity, and that is the purple chevron in the top left-hand corner. We're pulling together our more granular view at the moment. Then we are going to be asking for programme parties to help us pull together a practical plan in order for us to bring that out for industry consultation once the M5 design has been baselined. And we think we can make enough, we will know enough about the design in order to make practical assumptions on what the later activities look like. And we think that the input that we get from you as industry is absolutely essential in order to get that first draft of the plan as complete and as practical as it can be before we put it out to a more formal industry consultation. So that is something that we're asking for all of you. So if all of you could take away an action to think about whether you can help us and volunteer to go through that early planning activity in order to help build consensus and a practical plan for what this looks like going forward. And why it's important is, and Chris highlighted it earlier, and it's part of the delivery principles. If we're going to look, we don't have a big bang implementation here. We have the opportunity to take into account the pace of different participants and feed that into different activities, and we're already looking at that. So we're already reflecting the fact that some participants will be ready earlier. They'll be ready to go into sit activities. Some participants will take longer to mobilise because they may have supply chain procurement activities they may need to do, so that they can be ready for qualification activities later. So we're already planning in the approach to allow different parties to act at different, to develop at different paces and feed into the programme plan in its entirety. So it's really important for us to get your input so that we best reflect those activities and the timing and scope of those activities in our first draft of the programme plan for consultation. And part of that inclusivity is we are looking to do 2 industry consultations on the programme plan. So there are 2 opportunities for you all to provide input into our programme plan. And in parallel with that, we will be doing a walkthrough of the plan with participants so that you can get underneath the plan, you can understand it, you can understand the impact, and you're best informed in order to provide us with that input. So again, that August onwards phase is going to be very important because we're going to be walking through the plan, and we're also going to be walking through the design. And importantly, these are two different types of people we're talking about here, and there's probably a third type of person, which is the regulatory person. What we're looking for input into what we're looking for input into the planning activities are your program managers, are your planners. So we're looking for those program staff and people to provide us with the best input into the planning, and that's where we're going to get the most value out of it. So I think again, you know, we've got quite a long activity along the top there, but to reinforce Chris's points from earlier, you know, we don't need to wait for the plan to start the DB activities again. You know, that can start in line with the milestone 3 and milestone 5 activities that Chris referred to earlier. So I think you know, there's an extensive and very inclusive process that we put across the top here. At the end, we have realised that we do need to go through a formal change process associated with the plan, because we will be moving milestones. Of that, I have no doubt. So we will have to go through a change control process. So that is going to take a bit longer than we at first anticipated, because we hadn't scheduled that in to begin with, but we do realise we need to do that now. We are still intending to complete that planning process at least by the end of the year. I hope a little earlier, but it will depend on the feedback that we get and the ability to take the change requests through the change proposal. So I hope this gives you a bit of a feel for the program planning activity, the level of input you'll be able to provide through that process. And it is an unashamed sell and an ask from all of you to volunteer for that early planning activity. And so if you can have a think about that, and if you would like to participate in that planning activity, please do contact the PMO at mhhsprogram.co.uk, and we can take that into account, and we'd love to have you participate in that. So that's probably enough on the replanning activity. There are a few delivery principles and principles behind engagement with participants that we've also included in this slide in the bottom right hand corner. The Chris's and I have probably covered quite a lot of this in the general commentary. But the intention is to complete our design and plan activities as early as possible, taking into account the amount of industry participation and feedback we need to in order to have our credible design baseline and our credible program plan to go forward. And you know, it is important that especially maybe for unmobilized program participants, that we are going to schedule those walkthroughs of both the plan and of the design in August in order to work through that. We are going to look at the opportunities to move at the speed of the fastest and accommodate the participants that are behind in mobilisation are going to take longer. So again, that is a really important part of our replanning activity, and we really need to get under the skin of some of the transition and migration activities to look at how we can make the most of those opportunities to open up opportunities for early movers to make the most of the MHHS arrangements. And I think that largely covers everything. There's a lot of talking around lots of information on this slide, but again, if there hopefully we'll pick up some questions through Slido, and if we don't have all of the questions answered, then I'm sure we will pick them up post event, and we're quite happy to take any questions post event as well. And I think that wraps me up at this point, and I think I'm handing over to Kat to look at the Slido questions.
Yes, thanks, Jason. So yeah, we've had quite a few questions on Slido. So thanks for your presentations and for everyone for asking the questions. I'm going to take the first easy one, which is, will the slides be shared after this webinar? And yes, they will. We'll be publishing them on the website, and we'll probably put them through in the clock newsletter as well. So just go to the first question on Slido, which is, I know, Jason, you already sort of covered briefly about the key lessons from the faster switching program, but that's quite a popular question as well. So I wondered if there was anything else you guys wanted to add. So what are the key lessons from faster switching program that you can take on to MHHS?
Can I take that, Kat? Because
yeah.
And it's going to be rich coming from me, seeing as I didn't work on faster switching. But I did work on, I was at the tail end of Nexus, and I spent quite a bit of time talking to Ofgem about the faster switching lessons learned. And it's going to sound a bit trite, but it is about the replan. Both in Nexus and in faster switching, the replans came sort of towards the end of the program. But the key thing was that that was the point at which participants felt that it was their plan and it was achievable, and that it wasn't a plan that was imposed on them. And that's why we want to get the replan done really early up front here. So we have that opportunity ourselves to make that our plan and something that we all believe in. So I think that's the key lesson. And funnily enough, that question came up yesterday, and Rachel agreed with that as well. So I think that's the key lesson learned. I'm sure there's a whole load of others as well, but from my perspective, I think that's it. Jason, anything to?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we talked a lot about this inclusivity and the need for the plan to be agreed and inclusive. I think the other things that we've learned around the governance structure and the way that the program is established, I think that gives us a very sound basis in order to make progress whilst taking industry views into account. I think it is, again, another reflection from Rachel yesterday was, we must remember this is an industry-led program, and therefore, you know, the opportunity for industry input is absolutely essential to this. And I think we are set up through the right governance arrangements to be able to make progress and take those industry views into account. So I think the revised governance arrangements, I think, are also very important as part of that. I don't know if you, Chris W., if you had a view on that as well.
I agree, but I'd also like to add that one of the things we're doing with this program is setting it up as a blueprint for future programs. So we are deliberately picking up the lessons learned. Well, we've already spoken about the lessons learned from faster switching and Nexus that we brought into this program, but we're also going to learn the lessons of this program, so that when the next program comes along from industry, that we improve again. And that's a very important thing, and it's a very important aspect of what we're doing.
Okay, can I just add one more point, and it's just to bring out something that Jason mentioned in his talk, and I think it's a really important point, which is I would encourage you not to wait for the replan before you start your design build activities. It's not sequential, and just so you know, because we're looking at this phased approach, there are participants who have already started their design build activities. So please don't say you can't do anything until the replan. Okay, so do start if you can.
Yep. Totally agree.
Great. Thanks, everyone. It's going to go to the next question. So we've had another popular one on Slido. Will there be an opt-out option for all customers or just domestic?
Okay, so it's very straightforward. For domestic customers, they can opt out. For non-domestic customers, they have no option. They are in. Simple.
Oh, okay, that's that. Great. Thank you. Okay, that's brilliant. Next one is, do you still aim to start meter migration in the second half of 2024?
At the moment, yes, but if we can do it earlier, let's do it earlier.
I think it's a great example of where you can help us through the planning process, because we'll be looking at all of those future activities as part of the replan. So we'll be looking for where we can do things earlier, for where we can phase it to reflect the progress of different participants. So yeah, as Chris said, you know, if we can move faster, we will do for some people, but please participate in the planning activity and tell us how we can make the most of these opportunities. But it will all be part of the replan when we go through that replanning activity.
Great, thank you very much. Next question that we've received is, how are you working with Ofgem and Citizens Advice to manage external communications for customers?
Okay, that's important. So Ofgem has retained responsibility for the customer communications, and they will be working with suppliers to do that. Obviously, we will be in a supporting role in that. So, but obviously, a lot of our work is based on the technicalities of delivering. We're a delivery-focused organisation, so engaging the customers, and we need to work with suppliers. And obviously, if there's things we can do to support that, we will do that. But the lead of that is Ofgem and the supplier community.
Thank you very much. Just conscious of time, so I think what we might do is just kind of wrap up. We have had a few more questions, but we'll kind of look at those and then see if we can kind of pull those together and stuff as well. So yeah, thank you everyone for your questions. And then, sorry, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of a bit of a reminder about how you can kind of keep in touch with us if you've got any questions or engage with us. Those probably a lot of you on the call already receive it, but we do a weekly newsletter every Wednesday called The Clock, which updates you on kind of key information about the programme, what's happening, events, key documents, stuff like that. So you can sign up for that if you're not already via the MHHS website, either on the homepage or on the contact us page. We've also have the programme party coordinator team who are there to kind of help you mobilise through the programme. If you've got any like general questions or anything you need to kind of ask about, then you can email the PPC team, and that is ppc@mhhsprogramme.co.uk. And similarly for the PMO team, who are also there to kind of help with queries and stuff about the programme. So there's obviously lots of meetings and working groups happening, so they can help you with any queries you've got around that. And again, that's PMO@mhhsprogramme.co.uk. Obviously, these are all in the slides that we'll share, which will circulate this and the full list of questions, and the recording will all be published as well. So yeah, thank you very much for attending, and yeah, we'll be sharing everything shortly.
Thank you, everybody.